Yo, Project Override, Wolf Shield here. We're just going over 3 clips today. One is like 4 minutes from Clif High. One is 8 minutes from Alison McDowell. And then the other one's like a clip of a minute from someone who commented in the Override Telegram comment thread. And that's considering the constitutional republic. So this title, or the working title for this video, is Build for the Constitutional Republic. Upon reflection and all that, direct democracy, that was always the goal. But really, what we need to do is build for a constitutional republic. So going forward, that's the chief aim with how the tech's going to be built out. And of course, there is a voting aspect still, and it would be direct, but it wouldn't be like 100% proportional representation, direct democracy, one vote for everybody. Okay, so let's just get into the clips. This one's starting with Clif High, and he's speaking about real ID, and he brings up former President Trump, and then Alison McDowell clip is about she mentions JFK Jr. So I'm not attached to any of the presidential candidates. You may have your favorite, and neither of these clips speak highly of them or shine good light on them. So if you love the good press for presidents or potential candidates, and you're cheering for your team, this isn't the video for you. We're all about shining light on the truth of the matter and how we're getting played in a game, and the psychology that our minds are being affected through psyops and co-opting movements. We're shining the light on that so we can observe it, so then we can change the future, because the future is up for grabs. They're currently writing the future for us, and we're playing into their games. So we got to take back control, override that, and then write the future the way we want it and implement the technology the way we want it. So let's just get into the first clip. It's about, like I said, about 4 minutes from Clif High. I'll let it play all the way through. Let's go.
We'll see. They like their 33 days, the Freemasons and all of that. So now, on this regard, also here's a little tidbit for you. One of which I know to be factual, and the other one I don't. Okay, so part of this is a rumor that I can't validate, but there are some hints that it may be factual. But the first part is that Juan O'Savin is out there touting real ID. Okay, now my data sets say that Trump et al. Have to have a real ID. They have to have a digital ID structure in order, and they're going to pimp it to the people, saying we have to have this to protect the vote, which is factual. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. We need an ID system. You need to be able to prove who you are and that you're a citizen before you're allowed to make decisions for our country. So that is needed. Now, the hell of it is that, of course, that's the first step into the CBDC. Now, the part I can't validate is that there are rumors out there that Trump's team is heavily weighted with midwit management types that are known CBDC builders. That is, they're not just simply advocates, they're actually working on the thing. Okay, so maybe Trump's team is planning on putting in a CBDC. They certainly are planning on putting in real ID, which is the first step to the social credit system, right? And even if the government said you can't use real ID and establish a social credit score, the corporations are going to do that anyway, just because it's there and it's available. Unless there are incentives designed into the system that would disincentivize them, right? There are many ways to design a real ID system that you could use. It can be made automatic, and it'll track who does what with your ID and who even looks at it. Okay, so you can do that. You could build that into a blockchain so that every time that block is examined, it takes the data of the person doing the examination. And so there's a lot of ways to get around some of the limitations and the bad parts of a real ID. But at this moment, we don't know that they're doing any of that. But we do know that it's just the nature of humans, that humans working in corporations will take advantage of a real ID that they can trust, it is verified, et cetera, because it serves their purposes and lowers their cost for fraud and all of this. Now, in the midst of all three of these potential data sets I've got is the collapse of the currency, and that is the collapse of the purchasing power of the USA petrodollar. And that's one of the primary motives for this world war that the Zionists want to have. They want to keep their central banks going. The Zionists own all the central banks in the world, and you are their slave if you use their currency. Because you pay them just to create the stuff out of thin air, just to cause digits to exist. So anyway, this is our future. Welcome to it. It's going to be here in 32 days, according to my data sets. I mean, it can be off on the timing, obviously.
So yeah, that clip from clifhigh.substack.com. Go listen to the whole thing. I just snipped just a few minutes out of it, and he said 32 days. Published that on May 20th. So when you add up 32 days from May 20th, it comes out to June 21st. So just so you have context to what he's talking about. But mostly that clip was him speaking about real ID. And of course, real ID is digital ID. And that could be interchangeable with when I'm speaking about self-sovereign ID. Really, it's all the same thing. The difference between a real ID and a digital ID, I'm not too sure what that is. But I do know that the difference between a self-sovereign ID and a digital ID would be all determined by control over the keys to the ID. If a government can revoke your ID, that would mean that they've centralized the control over it, right? So then a self-sovereign ID would solely have management over your ID, and it would not be able to be revoked by a central party. So as he pointed out in that clip, he was saying the Trump team are in pursuits of this real ID. They have people on his team that are also building out CBDCs. This kind of fits in line with the narrative of the. I don't believe this narrative, but I think it's just another psyop. It was called the quantum financial system, and then a very brilliant marketing team paired that psyop with XRP and the Stellar blockchain. And of course, if you look at XRP and Stellar, they're all about bringing on CBDCs. So maybe that narrative is true in some regard. But really, like when you look at like the mind map of how that whole thing works, it's backed by gold, and it's like, wow, this looks really good, and it's backed by Trump, and therefore it's good. I mean, I personally, I scoffed at it when I first saw it, and I was like, yeah, no. But as Cliff was saying, like there's an actual use case, like to prevent fraud, to utilize digital ID, self-sovereign ID, whatever this real ID is. And so no matter what, someone's going to implement it. If it's not the governments, it's going to be corporations. And there's several iterations of corporations that have implemented it. Rather personally myself than being too concerned that I'm going to be trapped by a digital ID, I've slowly been compiling every digital ID that I find, and I start looking at the terms and conditions of the corporations behind it. So in some of these corporations, like the jurisdiction to sue the company is some small island, in the Atlantic, like what? So, and then it's like, what am I giving up for this digital ID? Anyway, so that's a corporation, for instance, where the government's going to force you to use a digital ID. The next clip will basically show how through trying to get you to play a game in terms of like finance games or investment strategies or UBI, a universal basic income, that's basically reframed as like a dividend to your community or something. That's how they're going to roll it out to make it acceptable and for people to get on board. But again, so that's more so like that clip was saying like Trump and his team will do it. So when you hear these like cues that are like drain the swamp and all this, everybody's rah drain the swamp and they repeat the slogan, but there's no thought to what happens after the swamp is drained, even if that's a thing, which again, it's a meme, it's a mind virus that gets in there and we forget what we were doing in the first place. So yeah, I think there's more to the ID again. So Project Override, with the technology that I hold, the puzzle pieces I've held since 2019, I have a system in mind that's going to change as we get more input here and developers come on board, which has not happened, by the way, as of this moment. But we very much could be last mover advantage, and we have the advantage to see how these companies, corporations, and governments are going to push it. And so, because I've been doing all my research up front, I already have a good archive to find out how they're trying to school you, right? Or how they're trying to angle it to get you on board. I think the principle is very simple, but my take on how a self-sovereign ID would be implemented is that because the ID is specifically so you can trust that someone is who they say they are and that only one vote from them is counting, depending on like what that ID is used for. And it can be, the use case can be very specific and then it could be not applied elsewhere, right? But in the tech that I wanted to build out, it would be an interesting experiment to see if we could create a verifiable ID or way of verifying somebody's a human and attaching it to an ID that is not attached to a government issued ID. And that idea came up because I know that how the system has been contrived with being attached to central banks. We are an employee and we have a lower status depending on how we are interacting with those initiating documents, right? So that goes into trust law and all this other stuff. But we'll get into that topic in another video. I'm going to do the now 8-minute Alison McDowell video. That'll bring us to about 21 minutes, and then I'll have some commentary. And then I'll move on to the 1-minute video and then try and close it up before half an hour goes by. So let's just get into the Alison McDowell video. And she'll be speaking about JFK Jr., just like last time, in a different light.
And the game, because how you understand the game is going to very much influence what your take is, right? And so most people will read this and they're like, yeah, Wall Street, those wolves, they're doing all of these bad things. And of course they are, because this whole thing is problem, reaction, solution. But ultimately what I've realized in all of my research around impact finance and Web3 technologies and tokenization is that the aim is not maximizing money per se. It's extracting data for signals intelligence that then can be used to used computationally and then used for through sort of sensors and actuators to then have sort of a feedback loop with the populace. And so it's that level of control of a complex dynamic system. The control isn't a bunch of strings to make people puppets and be homogenous. The goal is to have ubiquitous sensing that collects lots of data and that harmonizes it in sort of this conductor, electrical, orchestrated way. And so that is my understanding. And if you understand that, you're going to have a very different take than like the normal person, which RFK Jr. is sort of pandering to in this mimetic engagement, shall we say. So average is important because I think what they're looking for in signals intelligence with these things, these devices, is an average. So you're going to have crowdsourced wisdom of the crowd. The wisdom of the crowd, and that's what this is tapping into, and that's why we all have to have our continuous monitors that will eventually be our wearables, and our continuous glucose monitors for the diabetes that Bobby is going to save us from. Even though this is dirty electricity and this causes environmental diabetes, but he's not going to tell you that. Okay, so the average investor. So the goal is that soon we will all be investors through UBI, Universal Basic Income components that are coming from high net worth billionaires. And what I'm realizing now is that actually this UBI will be framed as a community currency, whereas I think the community and the commons is actually based on the complex system of the gut microbiome. So it's sort of like a dynamic complex system that they're looking to monitor and mediate in some way and utilize to harness for its knowledge, for the gut instinct, shall we say. And so I think the backstop of these community currencies that will be set up, so that if UBI becomes unpalatable, they'll say this is your community dividend, right? And that giving pledge that came out of Gates and Warren Buffett in like 2016, and all of these tech billionaires that are donating to the giving pledge, I think the giving pledge is going to be used to backstop these community currencies, which will give you the digital wallet that you can then play the game of financial technology investing. And maybe some of it will be for you, and then some of it will be for the climate, right? The UN SDGs, and this will all be linked to the UN and tokenization. Now, I will say, part of the mapping I've been doing recently is around weirdly the Kennedy campaign and their supposed fascination with permaculture now, which is going to be soil permaculture tokens for decarbonization of soil, and that Bobby is going to be presenting like maybe this week, or if not this week, next week in Austin for Consensus 2024. Now, Consensus 2024 is not unlike ETH Denver or whatever, so that it is Web3, but it's not just crypto like the Bitcoin. This is not pretending to be money. This is all of these networked solutions, right? Climate solutions and sustainability solutions and entrepreneurial finance solutions. And so he's going to be one of the major featured speakers at this Consensus 2024 gathering, which has been like happening for the past 10 years. So it's a very major conference in Austin, which links again to all of the biohacking community and the supplement sales people that they're going to get you healthy, and they're going to give you an app for your wellness, and then there'll be some behavioral credits for performing healthy behaviors, and then you can gamble with those with your crypto play to earn games, and maybe earn some money for you, and then maybe earn some money for the environment and that sort of thing. So that's what's coming, and it's very important to know that Nicole Shanahan would know all about this stuff. Like, I don't really think Kennedy is that bright, but at least Shanahan technically has her degree from Stanford and has done her fellowship stuff. So I think she definitely knows what's going on. So, okay, so we've got retail investors, the average retail investor. So again, knowing that in the future, even though there's a lot of income inequality, the solution that's going to be rolled out is that everybody gets some sort of community dividend, but there's performance indicators attached, behavioral indicators attached, and that you're supposed to be using this money and having it be moved around, which is part of the whole community currency narrative, is this velocity of money. Is it it's not Demirage maybe? It's not the demiurge, but Demirage, something like that.
The demiurge. Sorry, I just had to pause because she's like pretending to joke, but she's so serious. It is the demiurge. Yeah. The people that govern the lower realm, the physical flesh.
Like, the money is supposed to be in circulation moving because the whole goal is the signal, right? So they need lots of people to be quote unquote investing, which means playing their app-based finance games. And that'll be UBI rebranded as a community currency. Okay, so we need stronger regulation, oversight, and tougher penalties on manipulating the market and criminal behavior. Again, not to say that these people are on the up and up, because they're not, but they make the problem to give the solution. So it's this whole narrative of this ape retail rebellion against Wall Street, the big apes versus the democratic apes, the dumb apes versus the smart apes, and all of this stuff, which is, again, very evolutionary. What we're talking about is all of this token trading is part of the noosphere and is part of this human potential movement, right? And so this idea of apes is definitely channeling the neo-Darwinism kind of thing going on. So the oversight and the penalties and the manipulation are going to be all on blockchain. And of course, the idea supposedly is that, these bad guys are going to be regulated. Well, we're shifting into a new paradigm. The paradigm is that they want a lot of signals, and that's going to be framed as democratic participation within a libertarian context, within an entrepreneurial context. But it's all being done on the app, right? So you're not disconnected. This is the game board. You're on the game board with the device, whether it's smart contact lenses or your continuous glucose monitor or your smart shirt or your smart shoes or your phone, whatever, however it looks. And then eventually you won't even need a device, because they're setting up, Stepher sent me a bunch of stuff on, Internet of Bodies, next gen stuff, that they'll just read it from your thoughts. Or that's what they say. That's what they say that they plan to do. So yeah, they're going to regulate it because that's going to be blockchain, and they're going to make it transparent because they want the signal. And that's the whole goal. If you don't understand that that's the game, you'll think, oh, look, we're winning. It's the little guys versus the big guys. It's David versus Goliath. And Goliath set up the new game. And if they want us to all be David throwing little rocks at the giant, when the game is something else entirely, and you like, the game is behind you, and you don't even know to look behind you because you've been told that this is your target, and so you just look at that target and you think you're winning. And then again, it's teaming. It's creating a swarm intelligence, a teaming mentality. Now,
okay, so yeah, that was Alison McDowell. Please check out her YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Alison, that's with 1L, McDowell. And that was released earlier today. The whole clip's about like 30 minutes. I think the main point I got out of it, there was so much to be said there. It's probably be a lot easier if I just clipped like a shorter clip, so I could expand on like one little thing she says versus like the amount of so much she says in 8 minutes. But the manipulation of the market, problem, reaction, solution, the game they're trying to get us into play is this narrative of David versus Goliath. Like, we the little guys, much like GameStop, right? Just after I pause this clip here, she goes into GameStop. But it's that same narrative, right? I think even like these big players on Twitter that have a lot of clout, like Andrew Tate and stuff, they're like, oh, like GameStop's back, and that was promoted huge. But that's an example of a narrative where it's David versus Goliath. We, the little guys, are going to defeat the big guys. If you are any which way familiar about the crypto market, it's all about trading meme coins, just silly joke coins that are making people like hundreds of thousands of dollars while other people are getting screwed over. Anyways, when I looked at it from an objective lens, I was like, that's kind of like a rebellion against seriousness. Like, who wants to be talking about how these major investors have set up signals intelligence? Their main goal is to collect signals, and we're going to be investing in this technology that is ultimately going to enslave us. So it's almost like, it's kind of a funny thing, because I think the meme stuff is somewhat contrived, somewhat a natural occurrence, but to me it seems like a rebellion against the seriousness of what they're doing. So yeah, we'll just trade meme coins, like, yeah, I get it. But to go back to the manipulating of the market, recently there was a case by the SEC, arrested two brothers that were manipulating the Ethereum blockchain through miner extractable value. It's a way of like sandwiching trades, front running trades, and then basically being able to like launder money through that. So they're setting up case laws within the crypto and conducting like their regulatory structure. So then as time progresses here, they can make it this narrative really really defined, very narrow in what you can and cannot do. Besides that, she was talking about JFK. So JFK is Jr. is basically being used as a person who's trusted that speaks against Goliath, so to say, and he's helping shape, probably unknowingly, but he's helping shape the narrative of this David versus Goliath, like hold the government to account, put the budget on the blockchain, and so she was mentioning like the community currency, the UBI, since that narrative has probably run its course and one side of the political spectrum is against it, all they need to do is frame it differently. So the UBI will be turned into either a community dividend or a community currency. But you would only get that community currency if you demonstrate certain behaviors, right? So it's almost like this blend of like a social credit system, but instead of like a way to punish you, there's probably an incentive to get you to do something, right? So rather than a consequence, it's an incentive. And so maybe that's probably different from China's social credit system. This is just off the top of my head. But they have to do it. They have to find a way so that it's digestible by the populace. And so they're probably going to make it an incentive where Alison McDowell is pointing out that it'll be along lines of like a financial investing game, and it'll be regarding the climate and helping the climate. Just a bunch of BS in my point of view. I wouldn't participate in that, especially if it's like, I know what your ulterior motive is. The whole thing is to get a signal from me. I don't want to give you my signal. You want me to do A, B, C, and D. My nature is to not give you shit. But I do want to use the technology so that I can find out who has the merit, the best skill for the certain profession, so they have the best opinion on something to help guide society in a certain fashion. So let me just cut this short, other than there's like play to earn. There's so many different things she said. So the wisdom of the crowd, this is how they're going about it. But we'll come back to the fact that this video titled "Build for the Constitutional Republic," I'm pivoting here, right? And all my text still has everything still is similar. It's just what the aiming goal is. The aiming goal is not for total direct democracy, because the downside is rule by mob, right? So I'll just quickly show this is in the override comment section on Telegram. There's about 89 people in there. So this was from Dion. Dion. Oh, where was it? Direct democracy without an open press. Let me just go back to that. Direct democracy without an open press and educated users sounds scary. And then he posted, I think Dion's a man. Direct democracy in 2020-21 would have probably resulted in the execution of the unvaccinated. The majority of people had been conditioned to view us as filthy, anti-science, racist, and misogynist. I mean, that's such a good point. That's like, look at how fast direct democracy would have like effed us over. And then, oh, sorry, that was MB that said that last comment. And then Dion responded, for sure, we need an agreement that enshrines our unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, yeah, direct democracy without an open press and educated voters sounds scary, which is like 100%. So that's where it's like, okay, the aim is not for building direct democracy. It's for a meritocracy. So when we're voting, this, like I said, the building of the plans hasn't fucking changed, right? It's called a 21-day quorum, which ends up being a 45-day quorum, meaning that there's 21 days that votes happen. It gets tallied. People view all the comments in between. A second 21 days occurs. This plan can change, but my thoughts were the second 21 days, after everybody views all the tallies from the first round, you bring in specialists or professionals in that area of the topic, prove their credentials through their self-sovereign ID, whatever it is, and then those people get to vote and choose for everybody else because they have the expertise. Now, again, we could run in the same problem with the whole vaccination thing, because imagine if you had all these doctors who are being incentivized by being paid out by giving people vaccinations, and all of the other doctors who were telling the truth, i.e. the doctor that saved my sister's life, thank you, that those doctors would not be included, or somehow, so we need to have that foresight in mind too if we're actually building out that sort of system. So like I said, this is now, nothing's really changed. I'm just going to stop using the words like direct democracy, because under the guise of, say, a proportional democracy or direct democracy, we would get mob rule. And so Canada's under a constitutional monarchy, that's what they say. Oh, the crown's just symbolic for a constitutional monarchy or democratic monarchy or whatever it may be. And that's monarchy, like you'll see in this next video, is simply it's a dictatorship. And so the degradation, the degeneration of democracy, we've just been brainwashed to hear install democracy. And that's the problem, when really it's a constitutional republic where the Constitution is the checks and balances, and it protects property. Because under the guise of equality, mob rule can vote property out of your hands, right? So a constitution's meant to protect that. So that's this next clip. We'll just speak to that. So that's just a minute here, and let's see if we can just close it out.
The Constitution was ordained specifically to safeguard the principles of liberty proclaimed by the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration's phrase, "all men are created equal," means that men are equal before the law and before the Creator, regardless of their inequality in human society. The Declaration says that men are endowed with unalienable rights, and that the purpose of government is to secure these rights. The unalienable rights of man enumerated in the Declaration of Independence do not include equality, but they do include liberty, along with life and pursuit of happiness. Equality of all men in the eyes of God and before the law is a condition essential to freedom, but no other kind of equality is possible. Government efforts to achieve material equality will produce crushing tyranny, but will not make people equal. The writers of the Constitution were anxious to safeguard liberty against dictatorship, monarchy they called it, but their chief anxiety was to protect the country against democracy.
Protect it against democracy. You don't hear that too often, do we? So I'm just going to stop there. Project override the reset. Free Willy, don't be a Willis. I'm out.